Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. In a world where we're raising children today, we seem to be in one of those impasses where kids today seem to be in a situation where they feel entitled. In other words, with very little effort, they expect to have the whole world seized into their hands. Oh, alas, what to do about that? Joining us here on the program today, our guest has 14 years of experience working with severely troubled kids as a director at Children's Ark. By applying what is simply known as love and logic, he can work with kids who possess behavioral problems and has had that experience. And he's going to share with us today what we can do about our children who seemingly seem to be lazy but truly want to be achievers. And I'd like to welcome to our program today our guest, Jed Hafer of the Love and Logic Institute. Jed, how are you doing this?
Fabulous. Daniel, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Now, underachievement, it's interesting. It seems like I'm finding myself saying probably things that my parents probably used to say about kids in their day and age. What's going on in this world today where kids just don't seemingly want to apply themselves?
Well, I think you hit on one of the things already. We have kind of a cultural phenomenon of people believing that kids shouldn't have to struggle. A lot of well-intended parents have sort of set about in life to try to take away every ounce of struggle, strife, crisis, anything that their kids might experience that's a little bit hard, and kind of take that away. And really, when we do that, we are stealing from kids. We're stealing their ability to feel resilient, to feel like they are problem solvers. I mean, really, more than a motivated kid, I want a kid who believes that he or she can solve problems. Mm-hmm. And we solve so many problems for our kids, we do so much rescuing, that they start to believe that they need to be rescued, or they start to believe that they can't on their own solve those problems.
Mm-hmm. I know we've actually covered this, not this specific topic, but, the phenomenon, as we were talking about earlier, of the ideal of entitlement. And, realizing that, well, maybe the baby boomer generation was pretty much responsible for that because of the fact that we wanted the lives of our children to be better than what we had, so we were going to do everything we could to cater and protect them from having to go out there and have the bumps and the bruises that actually got us to where we were in the first place. So you kind of think, right, how do we turn that around?
Well, one thing I think is, as parents try to be intentional about letting their kids learn about the world and that this is a place where stuff is going to happen, but you can survive it, is our tendency to want to run in and rescue. Particularly, I was thinking about conflict. I have twins. My wife and I, we have 4 kids. We adopted 2 out of the foster care system that are a little boy and a little girl. They're twins, and they will fight over a toy. And that is one of those times if it gets loud and starts to annoy me, this fight over a toy, I want to run in and intervene and solve the problem, because I'm an American. I want to put it in the microwave. I want it to be done. I want the solution quickly. Right. And I'll come in and I'll say something brilliant like, who had it first? And you'll figure out which kid had it first, and okay, now it's your turn, and then it'll be your turn. And I fix the problem, and I walk away. And it strikes me, man, is that one of those times that these 2 kids could have been given the gift of working out a conflict, learning how to share, learning about conflict resolution, and no one probably would have got hurt or killed. I mean, if someone did, it would probably be the little boy, because my money's on the little girl if they tangle. but it's one of those times when probably I could have let them solve it. I could have just empowered them. Charles Fay talks about in one of the tapes on sibling rivalry. He says, say something like, hey, sounds like you guys are having a problem. I expect you to solve it. Good luck, or something like that. Basically just handing them the problem. And then it's interesting how oftentimes when we remember to do that, instead of jumping in and taking over, the kids really do come up with a pretty decent solution, or the problem doesn't last that long, or it's not that bad.
Well, one thing that's true, too, especially like in your house, as you talk about having 4 children, and I grew up as the oldest of 3 boys, is that when there is a conflict that goes on between, the siblings, as you're talking about there, that once it ends, and if one decides to be stubborn, realizes after a while, well, I don't really want to play by myself. So you start making those adjustments so you can accommodate, the feeling of bringing somebody back in, so you've got somebody to play with.
That's right, and we all have to do that. We all get on each other's nerves at times, and we have to sort of come back around and work it out. The thing I try to teach my kids is, if they're causing a problem for someone else, that's when really it's going to turn out not very fun for them. So my two oldest boys, who are real close in age, they will fight sometimes in the back of the car. And parents will notice this. Kids will be real opportunistic. They'll fight when you're on the computer trying to do your taxes. They'll fight when you're on the telephone with your best friend. Or they'll fight when you're driving, especially if you're somewhere you don't know where you're going and you're really trying to concentrate, or the roads are icy, whatever it is. That's when they'll pick to fight. So my sons know that I charge $1 a minute to listen to fighting in the car. And I say it, before we ever even get in the car. They know that's kind of my policy. And if they start fighting, I actually get happy. Oh, that sounds like $1. And oh, no, I was just giving them a hug. We were just playing. But that's what I really am saying to them, without coming out and saying it, is I expect you guys to solve this problem. I'm not going to jump in and referee or intervene every time there's a conflict.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you consider to be the roots of underachievement? I mean, I see here that, 2 of your children were adopted out of the foster care system. That's got to be really tough for those 2 kids to be in a system like that in the first place. Thinking of the confidence they may not have because they don't have parents. They're in a system that a lot of times has been found to maybe not be so strong, and then you pull them out to try to say, we love you, we want to see you succeed. I mean, talk about those challenges there and the roots of underachievement.
Oh, you're so right. And the kids I work with at the Children's Ark are also kids mostly out of the foster care system. Occasionally they're in the mental health or the correction system. But all of those, one of the things in common is there's not a lot of messages of how valuable you are, how smart you are sent. They're not perfect systems. For my kids, especially our little boy, had some hearing problems, and then that led to some speech problems. So he really didn't believe he was very smart, and he really didn't believe he could do well in school. We had to send messages of achievement. And I learned this from Charles Fay in Love and Logic. Instead of telling him how smart he was, we would get him to do things, and then we'd ask him how he did it. Because it's important that kids believe when they get an A on a paper, it's not because I was just born brilliant. It's because I worked hard. I think a lot of the parents make mistakes, and I'm not saying, hey, don't tell your kids they're smart. There's nothing wrong with praising your kids and telling them they're smart. But what we found, especially with kids with achievement problems, is if they believe that it's inherent, you're either born with it or not, it can be a real barrier to trying. So instead of, when they get that good grade, telling them how smart they are, with our little boy, we would say, hey, you did this, and it could be something pretty small. How did you do that? And of course he would say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And we'd say, well, did you do your best on it? Yeah. And we'd get him to actually say it. We'd get him to say out loud, because the brain hears that. This unquestioned, unfiltered message goes back to his own brain and in his own voice, which is a powerful force, to say, I worked hard. That's why I did well on whatever that little thing was. And we just built on that. And he's now doing well. He started out in first grade probably at the bottom of readers in his class, and he's now probably in the top 25% or so. And that's just nothing magical that we did. We didn't go out and hire a tutor. It's just constantly finding those little victories and those little things that he did, and then saying, how did you do that? And getting him to believe that his effort, that Love and Logic says it's the strains, not the brains. His effort is what caused him to do well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you bring up something that really our listeners should hear very clearly, and I remember hearing about this from the author of The 1 Minute Manager. And he talks about the fact that a lot of times we just don't celebrate the little wins, and it's those little wins that lead up to the huge victories.
That's exactly right. I'd have to agree with Tim Blanchard there, that when you see something good, and we used to just jump all over it and praise it. What I've really learned in terms of refining it from Love and Logic.
You're spreading peanut butter all over the kid and going nuts. It's like, no, not a little bit.
Exactly. Now we'll say, again, get them to say how they did it, or get them to say what was good about what they did. I want to say a little bit more about the roots of achievement problems, because it's not where this kid is coming from ultimately that's going to decide how motivated he or she is, or how well kids achieve. I've seen kids who basically were labeled, this kid can't learn at all, become amazing students. And I've seen kids that in terms of IQ, they're off the charts, but they literally can't complete a class. They can't even get a grade in a class because they just can't stay with it. Mm-hmm. It's really a puzzle. There's not one or even a couple things that are the foundations for underachievement. Charles Fay calls it a puzzle, and there's a whole bunch of pieces to look at. The real key ones for me, first, is there a basic need that's not being met? Mm-hmm. If just the way our brains work, if there's some basic need that we're focused on, and that might be that we don't feel safe, something's scaring us, it might be that we're hungry, it might be any basic need in our life, our brain has a real heck of a time focusing on learning anything or any other task. It's like if you were standing at the bottom of a canyon and there was a giant boulder rolling down right at you, and someone handed you math problems, you could be the most brilliant math student in the world, but if you cannot focus on those problems because you're really worried about your immediate need or your immediate safety. So when we work with kids at Children's Ark, a lot of these kids come in, and what we find out is there's some real basic need in their life that is not being met. As I go around to more and more schools around the country, I'm finding more schools that feed their kids. You know, they give them breakfast, and they have snacks, and they have after-school programs where they feed them snacks or even dinner. Those schools are seeing success. You know, it's not just, we give them food. There's a need for a lot of these kids that's not met very well in their lives. And when the need gets met, bam, there's a huge jump in achievement. I know
as a student in the California school system, you're exactly right when it comes to the food part of it, because there were a lot of immigrants, Hispanics and Mexicans, and the meals they got at school generally were the only things they ate all day long. And it was just astounding to see the kind of effort made. Go ahead.
That's some of my kids, some of the kids I work with in my program. When they get to us, it is just clearly they haven't been getting enough nutrition, and when that need gets met, some of them are different kids just right away. Mm-hmm. Another huge thing in the achievement puzzle that I really want to point out to parents is a power struggle. One of the needs we all have is to feel some control in our lives. Mm-hmm. And if I'm feeling like everybody around me is trying to control me, then all of a sudden that's just like an unmet need. It's just like if I was starving. I don't feel a sense of healthy control like I really need to function as a human being. So guess what I will do? Guess what any person will do? If they really feel a control loss, they will fight for control. Mm-hmm. And throughout history, there's examples of someone trying to control someone else or a group of people, and those people find a way to not be controlled. You could study the entire human history, and you'd find example after example of ways that, even in the prison system, what do they give them uniforms. Well, what do the prisoners do? They find a special way to wear that uniform or some way to express individuality where they're saying, ultimately, you can't control me. And even in the maximum security, super max federal prisons, they find all kinds of contraband and all kinds of things that the inmates just get incredibly creative. Sometimes there's no other purpose other than to say, you can't stop me from doing this.
Right. I know another thing, too, is I was attending a parent-teacher conference with my wife's son, and they were saying this day and age, too, when you try to, I guess, assert control, more or less force a child to do something, this day and age, she says, what they do, they don't fight back like they used to. She says they just simply shut down with basically passive resistance. I don't know which is more frustrating, is that or fighting?
The passive resistance drives me nuts. That's a button for me because it is a helpless feeling when you're trying to motivate this person and they know that, and so they're just to show you. And how many kids have done this? Kids they'll hurt themselves just to show you can't control me, you can't make me. So Love and Logic, that's really one of the very first things Love and Logic would say to a parent or a teacher. If you feel like you're really, really working hard and this kid's not working hard at all, end the control battle and say something to the kid like, you know what, we've decided we will love you no matter how many years it takes you to pass the 7th grade.
Right.
We will love you no matter what kind of job you end up having someday. We support you. We care about you no matter how hard you try or don't try. This is your thing, and we've been, some parents even apologize. Hey, we've been stealing from you, but by trying so hard for you, we've been stealing opportunities for you to try and learn. So we're not going to do that. This is your thing. And some kids will immediately get better. Some they won't. They'll have to test it and say, oh, really? You really don't care if I get, 6 Fs. But the parents especially who have taken this first really tough step, and we found when you do something in the short run that's the right thing, it kind of feels like the wrong thing. It kind of hurts, and they don't want to do this. But that letting go, that ending of the control battle, eventually, I've seen that time and time and time again pay off with parents and teachers, where the kid starts to finally own their grades. And we don't lecture them about their grades. We ask them how they feel about it. They bring home Fs, and we go, oh, man, how are you feeling about that report card? And a lot of times the kids will go, oh, I don't care. Or they may be a little bit honest, not too good. But the response is just tons of empathy from the parent or the adult, and well, you should have listened to me. I told you to study. That now we're guaranteeing that we're going to ruin any lesson they might have got from that poor result.
Okay, so let's go ahead and follow this trajectory, because I know that there's a situation like that even in our house where my wife is trying to, not that her son's doing poorly in school, he's at a 2-point something, and I said, hey, as far as I'm concerned, at least it's showing that he's showing up and he's making an effort. I mean, that should be enough for right now, but her and the boy's father are these kind of parents that are having this attitude, well, we got to stay on him and make sure that grade gets, better and better and better, and I'm thinking, well, he seems to be resisting that. So taking this love and logic step that you're talking about, where you just finally say, you know what, as you were saying, if it isn't working out for you, then, that's really up to you. And they decide, oh, so the grades really don't matter, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start flunking out. What would be the steps from that point that you would take to where they would turn that around? Do you just really sort of kind of let it go?
Yeah, and it's important that it's not a bluff. I have to really understand in my life what's a wish and what's a control. What do I really have some control over? And what do I just wish I could control, but really deep down I know I can't really make this happen? And usually the things I can control are things that have to do with me. I can control how hard I work. I can control how much time I put into something. What I seem to not be able to do is control what other people do. Man, I wish I could, especially if you're driving in California, you really wish you could control what other people do. But I just can't. So I have to, if I'm really honestly going to do this, and I'm really honestly going to say this to a kid, I have to mean it. And so what it means is that I've recognized, for you to work really hard in school is a wish for me. I cannot make you. I can't make it happen. And so when I say that, it's really not, it sounds like, and love and logic can sound like this sometimes, like, oh, it's a bluff. Person's going to call me a bluff. This is really not a bluff. I'm making a realization. I cannot force you to do better in school. I can try. And parents have been trying for years, and there's now a lot of research that shows the more things that parents take away, so this kid, say he loves baseball, and he's not doing well in school, well, we're going to take baseball away from you. There's a small percentage of kids on the lowest level of motivation that will be enough of a motivation, they'll try harder. But for most kids, if they really are struggling and their achievement is really low and their motivation is particularly low, the more things we take away, the worse it gets.
Right.
We recognize that, this is one of the few things that excited him about going to school or excited him about life in general. This is one of the places where he feels like he's good at something. That's especially a dangerous thing to take away from a kid, is something that he feels like he's good at. We had a kid who was a wonderful skateboarder, and grades started to slip. Parents said, well, we're not going to let you skateboard. First of all, this kid was super rebellious, so he found ways to skate, and they were trying to stop him. And that skateboarder's been doing that for many years, I believe. But the other part that happened is really, this was, when we finally got deeper in the issue, this was one of those few things this kid felt like, I'm good at this. And that sense of self-efficacy, I'm good at something, is really, really important to achievement. So actually, when not only was that added back, they actually upped the ante, and they said, well, we'll take you to some competitions because you are good, and we'll buy you some new skateboarding stuff. And it wasn't a bribe; it was just supporting something he was good at, and the kid's grades shot up. So I have to be willing to say, okay, if I'm going to end the control battle and say, we love you, whatever kind of grades you get, and the kid goes, oh yeah, really? And he brings home a whole bunch of really poor grades, I have to be willing to stick to this and say, I'm going to have empathy. I'm going to be sad for you, but I'm not going to lecture you. I'm not going to flip out, and I'm not going to all of a sudden take back. It's about ownership, really.
Right.
I'm handing ownership of this problem to the kid, which is who it really belongs to. These are not my grades.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get paid based on these grades. These grades are not going on my permanent record or transcript. They're his grades. So I just basically am stating something that's true, which is this is his thing to own. And the worst thing I could do is jump back in and say, no, I'm going to own this problem. I'm going to take this back, and you're going to sit down with me and study every single night. There's a long, long history of that not working. And as scary and painful as that might be as a parent, and I've had to be in that place, it's really what Love and Logic says. When you're in the control battle, you really do end it. Doesn't mean what you really want to be is a helper. If
right.
the kid says, hey, will you help me with this? You're not saying, well, that's your problem, kid. I don't care. You're saying, I'm here to help, but I'm not going to own your effort because that's a wish.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. Now, it's really interesting when you take that approach, too, because I remember my own son was struggling in school, and I would sit down and I would try to help him. He was, well, I could use some help, Dad, and I'd sit down and say, okay, what do we want to do? And then all of a sudden it just seemed like he would shut down, And I said, well, okay, well, if you really don't want to spend the time to make an effort while I'm helping you, then I'd rather just go do something else. You just come and you let me know when you're ready to take care of this, because I'd rather just not fight you on this. And I was coming from a spot, too, though, that I remember I, in school, screwed around, and there were times that I had bad grades, especially in high school in my junior year, just kind of threw reckless abandon out the window. But my parents had such an interesting way, they'd kind of take a look, oh, so you got that, and they kind of actually were applying Love and Logic, even though I didn't recognize it probably at the time. And the fact is, as I started thinking to myself, but Daniel, is this really how you want to turn out? So, in my senior year, what the funniest thing was is I turned that around, I start trying out for basketball, and all those kinds of things. And then by the end of the year, I decide that I want to be one of the speakers at graduation. Mind you, now I'm not, an honors student by any way, shape, or form, but it was something I wanted to do. And what was interesting was the principal himself was I had done something that normally would have gotten me kicked out of school for a day. And he says, I'm going to let you off the hook just because of the amazing turnaround that I've seen in you. I mean, for crying out loud, you're going to be going and giving a speech at graduation. Most people are going, Dan Davis is doing that? But those are those things that make you feel good because, as you're saying, a child is taking ownership of them, and that's how I would agree with you that these things do turn around.
Yeah, you're living proof. As soon as you took the ownership, everything changed. Mm-hmm. And there's only so many units of concern to go with any problem. If we use all of those units, then there's none left for the kid. And the kid goes, well, the adults are doing all the worrying about this. I think another real important thing that I would recommend for parents in that situation where they've now kind of handed the problem back and said, hey, this is your thing. We're certainly here to help. I would try to focus on as many strengths as possible. Find those things that he does well. Find those things that she does well. It doesn't have to be a whole subject. It could be one part of one subject. It could be something that's not even related to school. But really, really focus in, invest in, spend time investing in those things that the kid feels like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. And it's assuming it's legal, assuming it's a legal activity. And I do have to sometimes, we have kids that I work with who they're good at something illegal. And I think, well, the only thing I'm good at is selling drugs. Well, let's take that entrepreneurial ability that you have and turn
become
it into
a pharmaceutical salesman.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a great salesperson. Let's use those powers for good. Or we've had kids who break in and steal cars. All of a sudden you're a locksmith or you're a mechanic. And we really do. We have to sometimes stretch a little bit to find a strength that could be turned into something that's not antisocial. But I really recommend that for parents is find and focus on, notice, spend time on those things that your kid says, yeah, I'm pretty good at that. And if you don't see something, ask them, hey, what are you good at? Oh, no. Start to pull those things out. Start to really, go to their friends, go to their teachers, go to other people who know them and say, what would you say are his or her strengths, and really try to bring those out. And then activities that are non-school, non-teaching academic kinds of activities, there are kids who they go out in the woods and hang out, or they start to hike, they start to do some other activity that's active, but it's not, they're not being graded for it. And we've seen that really launch kids' achievement, because there's just something about, it's hard for people not to learn. Mm-hmm. We're always communicating, we're always learning, whether we're trying to or not. And so, I know a lot of kids who started hanging out with somebody and hearing their stories. And it's funny, they weren't in class hearing from a teacher lecture about a subject, but they were out on the street corner listening to this guy talk about fixing cars and fixing up cars and doing body work on cars. And pretty soon this kid has some expertise, but is it as good as if he was sitting in the classroom learning? Well, maybe not on paper. He's not getting a grade for it. But as a human being, just that natural brain function to want to take in more information, figure out what things mean, that natural curiosity, that serves kids really well. And I've seen so many kind of, I would say, unconventional activities. And for some kids, it's just a sport. It's an activity that you would think of. But for some kids, it's the last thing you'd think of. They really get into, and all of a sudden that helps with grades or achievement in school.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly agree with you, Jed, that it's nice to have things in place that the child really feels motivated or attracted to. For instance, in the case of my own wife's son, he likes boxing. So I said, well, find a way to tie in boxing with his grades, but I was kind of probably going the wrong direction, much like my parents did with me. Oh, okay, you got that D here. I don't think you'll be seeing any time on the basketball court, and it's like, why don't you give me a shot? I'll make that D up, but see, it was too black and white. So I just lost altogether, versus the case where I found myself sort of suggesting that, and I thought, wait a minute, this is the one thing he seems to enjoy going to go do, so let's just make sure that we keep sending in the check so he still has his membership, and just kind of leave the grades up to him. But she still, because she's a highly self-motivated person, tends to think that that's the way that he should be. And so what she begins to recognize is that he sort of has a just getting by, I'll do enough that's just necessary, I'm still going to have my boxing. And I'm sure that most parents in a situation like that become frustrated, like, will this ever turn around? And then they flip out and they go back to square one, which probably makes things even worse.
Sure. My dad, same scenario. I'm a basketball guy, too. And when I switched sports, I switched to basketball and started practicing a lot and spending probably way too much time on the sport, not enough time on the grades. My grades slipped a little bit. So lo and behold, I finally bring home a little bit better grade, and that's when my dad bought me a new basketball. It was a pretty wise thing on his part, and he didn't bribe me with it. He didn't even mention it. He didn't say, "Oh, if you do better, I'll get you." He just waited until I did something right, and that's really kind of the whole trick to parenting, I think, is catching your kids doing something right. And when I did something right, then along came, and it was a double reinforcer, because it reinforced the fact that I had worked a little harder and gotten a better grade in school, but it also catered to this, what was becoming an interest and a strength of mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the just getting by situation, you're saying, okay, well, in an underlying way, well, if that's what you want to do, that's fine with me.
Absolutely, and the less that can seem or feel like it's a technique on my part as a parent, the better. The more sincere I can say, hey, we really do care about you. No matter where you end up academically, no matter where you end up in terms of career, we care about you. We like you.
Yeah.
Your how much we like you is not tied to your grades. That's the biggest mistake I think parents make, is they make such a big deal out of grades that some kids start to believe, oh, if I want to punish my parents, I can just start messing up in school. And look how they get. You look for, is this a proactive kid or a reactive kid? If this kid's proactive, like, I want to mess with these people, he might very well do something at school, and sometimes this happens with behavior stuff, and sometimes it happens with grades, just to see what mom and dad are going to do. Or all these teachers and all these different people are meeting to trying to force me to do something. I bet I can win this one. And they rub their hands together and they dig their heels in, and they really will make things a lot worse.
Uh-huh. And so what do you tend to do in that situation?
If I recognize proactive behavior, I try to get even more proactive. In other words, when kids are sneaky, I try to get even more sneaky.
There you go.
And in this case, it's about motivation. But what's going on below the surface is what's motivating this kid. And instead of being motivated by his own achievement or need or desire to learn, he's motivated by the ability to mess with me. So that's what I want to take away. If you ever tell kids who are getting teased, oh, just ignore it. You know, obviously the kid who flips out the worst when he gets teased is going to become the favorite target of the teasers. The same exact thing is true with adults. The more fun a reaction, the more blow-up, entertaining power struggle I can give a kid, the more he wants to do it if he's that proactive kid who's seeking that out. So once again, really the trick is, this is sort of a little bit of judo here. We would end the power struggle. We'd pat that kid on the head or the shoulder and say, really like you a lot, like you so much that no matter how you do in school, I'll still like you. And then sort of move away from them physically and also kind of emotionally pull away a little bit and let the kid go, oh, this is my thing. They're not freaked out about it anymore. And once again, that ownership will transfer back onto the shoulders of the kid where it belongs if we do it right.
Yeah, I know that it's been an interesting transition even for my wife's children, you know, to come back here from Texas. And one of the things that was interesting about her son is when they would come for the weekend and stay with us, that he had this habit of putting things off until the very last minute so everybody was waiting on him. Yeah. And she'd get all frustrated. Hey, you need to get moving. I said, no, this will be okay. This is going to take some time, but watch this kind of self-correct. And I said, you know, since I'm the one driving the car, we'll go ahead and deal with this, because at one point he made me almost late for work and just didn't seem to really care too much about that. And I said, well, that's fine, even though I was really kind of pissed. I'm like, boy, this kid has no compassion for my boundaries, but I said, somehow this will work itself out, and it started to. Well, yeah, I know, you need to get to boxing. Okay, I understand that. What time do you have to be there? Okay. Well, let me see if I can get this finished in time to get you there on time. And inevitably, we might be a little bit late. Oh, okay, but then it still continued. I'm going to wait till the last minute on Sunday to get this done, and I know that you need to get to work, but I need to get this done. No, I really need to get going now. We let you know a couple of hours ago when we were supposed to leave, when you needed to be ready. You're not ready, and I have to go. I'll see you later. It's unfortunate now that you'll have to walk in the rain to the bus to take the bus all the way back home. Okay? And then the next one was a UFC fight that we had scheduled for him to go with us, because he really, you know, enjoys, you know, the mixed martial arts and that. So here we are waiting for him to get his laundry dry so that he can go, which means that we're going to be late again. I said, well, you've got a choice, really. I said, you can choose to go with the clothes that you're wearing now, or you can choose to sit at home. Either way, we're leaving in 5 minutes. Well, no, you know, and then he starts to blame why the laundry isn't done on his mom for something. I said, now, hold on a minute. Now, you've been here for a couple of days now. Why didn't you get your laundry done the day before or the night before? And he just didn't seem to have an excuse. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. Are you going to go in the clothes that you're in, or are you going to stay at home? Inevitably, he decided to stay at home. Well, that was his power struggle. We came back. Oh, man, you should have seen those fights that we were watching. What entertainment that was. You know? And he's just sitting there and he's just stewing. You just know that he's upset. Like, I tried to play the power struggle and it still didn't work.
And I bet the next time there was an opportunity for a power struggle, he went, I don't think I'm going to do that.
And the fact
we found that time and again when we followed through with some action, the kid who really was trying to mess with us or get a rush out of making everybody wait or whatever, when it didn't turn out very fun for them, they're the first one ready to go and complain as can be. And if they're not, it's okay, because we took care of ourselves. You know, you didn't miss the fight because of him. Right.
And the fact is you're absolutely right. When it was time to go at another time, I need you to be ready, and we need to be out the door at this particular time. He finally seen, he's not messing around. When it's time to go, it's time to go. But I only did it during things that I knew he really wanted to do.
There you go. Well, isn't that true? The kids learn from our actions more than they do learn from our words.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about a child who's disrespectful? Because I think that also can spring from underachievement and probably even just the frustration of feeling like they're underachieving or just getting by and they want to do better. What do you think?
Disrespect. Well, how long do we have? Because that's probably a day. So we have a few more minutes, right?
Sure.
One of those. This is a tough one for the staff that I work with. The kids obviously these kids that I work with have been kicked out of at least 5 places usually before they come to us. And so they really, really are good at being disrespectful. They know how to do it. They've got the black belt. And the staff, as we're training our staff, it's such a hard thing not to get sucked into in terms of making it our problem or owning this kid's disrespect. But ultimately, I have to remember this. Whether or not he's respectful to me, is that a wish or a control? It's a wish. And what can I control? Well, how I react. I can control how respectful I am. I can control what I model, which is really important, how kids learn really from watching us be, in this case, respectful to others. And so how disrespectful is this kid to me, that's a wish. And I don't even want to get into that, and demanding his respect. Number one, I know that doesn't work very well on me. When kids jump in, or anyone jumps in my face and demands respect, I tend to not want to give it to them.
Right.
And there's research. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but kids are actually remarkably like actual people. They're very similar in a lot of ways. And so someone
even when they become teenagers, right?
Yeah, well, then they're not them. But if someone jumping in your or my face, that's probably not going to work really well in terms of making us respect them. So why would we think it would work on a kid? What I really have to ask myself when a kid's being disrespectful, whose problem is this? Oh, it's his. Why? Because he in his life is going to need to learn how to be respectful. She in her life is going to need to learn how to be respectful. So I'll ask kids, hey, you're kind of being disrespectful. Do you think that's a problem for you that you're disrespectful, or do you think it's a problem for me? Problem for you. Really? Because I know how to be respectful to others. I have a job. I went to the interview and they liked me. They hired me. I have a job. I met my wife's parents. They liked me enough to allow me to marry her, and so it's worked out okay for me. I know how to be respectful. How about you? You like money, right? Yeah. Well, suppose it's like a job interview, a really cool job, something you've always wanted to do, and it's that time. Is that a time that you think it would be important to be respectful? Yeah. Well, when would be another time? My kids will say, "Oh, in front of my judge." Yeah, that's a good one. Got to be respectful when you're in front of the judge. How about another one? Oh, my grandma. Oh, yeah, you got to be respectful of grandma. And they'll give us 2 or 3 a lot of times instances in their lives where it's important to be respectful. Now, who came up with the rationale why they need to be respectful? They did.
Right.
Whose problem is it? Who's owning this issue now? Instead of me owning it, the kid is owning it. So usually during calm times when everything's going fine and we're actually friends, that's the best time to have that conversation. But ultimately what I really want to do is set up an equation where it costs the kid something, just like your example of the UFC fight, where they're being disrespectful kind of costs them something and we make it look like it was just effortless on our part. Maybe somewhere they really were excited to go, and then right when we're ready to go, we say, I'm sorry, we've been talking about respect a lot, haven't we? Yeah, my policy is I only take kids who are really respectful out in public. So when you can work on that a little bit, that's no fair. I know, lots of empathy, but we stick to our guns, and then the kid misses out on that particular thing he or she was looking forward to. But the real key, again, is ownership, just like grades. I'm glad you brought up this example because they're so similar. And I'll say this in the last couple minutes that we have. The same issue of ownership is the key to, if the kid owns his achievement, if the kid owns her level of motivation in school, good things are going to happen. If we own it, bad things are going to happen. Disrespect, just about any other problem you can imagine. Love and Logic says count up the problems and see who's doing all the owning, see whose problems they really are. If I'm doing the owning of this problem of disrespect, I'm really not helping the kid learn to be respectful. What I'm helping is myself into heart medication.
Right.
I'm helping myself get really, really frustrated because it is unenforceable. It is a wish that kids would be respectful. They should be. They ought to be. We wish they'd be. It would be nice if they were. But ultimately, can we force that out of them? Not legally, anyway. Especially in California, I think there's some real strict rules about that.
It's interesting, too. The last time we had a guest from the Love and Logic Institute, we were talking about that very thing, about how kids, they've got a lot more energy than we do. And I said, but the key weapon, if you want to call it, that we have as adults, we have time and patience. Oh, I know, but we'll get there eventually, won't we? And an example of that, is back, again, with using the son again, because he's going through some adjustments. But, I see clearly that he's making some really good strides and needs to be appreciated for those. But he had actually taken some money, which isn't unusual. Kids usually will take money from their parents, but he took it from me, and it was just $5 or $6, and that didn't bother me that much. I would have said, "Well, just go ahead and give me the $5 or $6 back." But then he had lied about taking it to his mother. He had also taken more than he said he did, but the key was that he was tremendously disrespectful to her. You mind your own business, and this and that and the other. And so we sat down and I talked to him. I said, "Yeah, you took $6. I'm sure you're pretty hungry. That's okay with me, But you did lie about taking it, right? You lied to your mother." And he says, "Yeah, I did do that." I said, "Well, we're going to have to do something about that." And I said, "But the thing that really bothers me the most is that you were disrespectful to your mother about something you did. And is that true too? Why were you that way?" "Oh, I don't know." "Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you pay me $30 back. And you just decide how long that's going to take you. It can take you today, it can take you a week, it can take you a month. But I won't be able to afford to pay for your bus pass and for your boxing membership until this gets rectified. And that's up to you how long it takes. And you come and you let me know what you're willing to do to make up for this." So then he went into his little child game, as we've been talking about throughout the program. "Well, I'll get back to you when I'm ready to do it." "Okay, well, that's fine. You got that list for me yet?" "Okay, well, maybe you'll have it next weekend." Pretty soon, he started seeing a month go by. He hadn't been to boxing, and it was starting to really frustrate the hell out of him. To the point he started fighting with his mother about us. "So what's going on?" "Well, I really want to go back to boxing." "Well, why didn't you do something about it? You've been given opportunities. When are you going to get this done?" So I said, "I'll tell you what, I think you've probably learned your lesson. This probably won't happen anymore. So we're going to go ahead and reinstate your boxing." You could just see him light up, because I didn't want to keep it away from him too long. But those are one of those situations that, time and patience usually work things out.
Well, that's it. I mean, you just really nailed the formula. The formula is empathy plus consequences, and that's what really does teaching. And we make it look easy. How to come up with that? This is the hint I would give every parent. Make a list. What are your wishes, and what are your controls? What you did is find a control. Well, he needs me to get him the bus pass. He needs me to get him the boxing or pay for boxing. And so you found your controls, and you managed around those, and you said it. We have time, we have patience, and we can find those controls. And eventually, it's not about teaching the kid who's boss. It's about showing them that, no, there are some things that I can control. And I really, to keep myself from getting frustrated, I operate around my controls. And in that case, you found your controls, and it worked. That's probably, in a nutshell, one of the best things parents could take away is that's what our controls are. Can I make my kid eat? No. But can I control what is served? Yeah. Can I control when it is served? I can always find some controls. And whenever I got a wish, I want to get good at finding my controls. Dan, I really appreciate you having me on. This is what a cool show. I'm really interested in what you guys are doing, and it sounds like a pretty neat thing.
Yeah, we've been broadcasting our program for well over 6 years now, and we just found a particular need, and this is a subject, too, that's really important because of how many grandparents are actually raising their grandchildren this day and age. In fact, I used to live next door to a pair of grandparents that were doing just that thing. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out so good for them because he eventually found himself from the 6th grade on being on house arrest, and eventually now he's, from what I understand, been incarcerated. And, who knows? But that's certainly not what parents really want to see happen to their own children. And you can see where making them personally responsible for their actions, as we've been talking about, can be very important.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I'd love to come back on. I'm actually going to go demand some respect from some kids right now and see if that works.
Okay, well, Jed Hafer, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. It's been a pleasure. Go ahead and quickly give out your website.
Sure. The Love and Logic website is just loveandlogic, all spelled out, .com, loveandlogic.com. And the phone number, they have an 800 number, and it's 1-800-LOVE, L-U-V, Logic. And that's one extra letter, but by the time you hit the C, the phone's already ringing. So 1-800-LOVE-LOGIC, and when you call during business hours, a live person will answer the phone and talk to you, and that alone is something pretty special.
Well, that's very exciting. Jed Hafer, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
My pleasure. You guys have a great one.
You bet. Want to thank you, the listeners, for out there. Go to loveandlogic.com to find out more about how you can assert your personal control to yourself so that way you don't have to put it onto your kids. We also encourage you to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Thank you again for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.